Hello everyone, I'm back with another video. This time is to showcase one of the tools I built that kind of helps out when I develop some applications using Spring Boot. Typically, what I like to do is deploy on AWS, and I like to deploy to a Docker environment. And with this tool, it allows me to bypass all of that um, command line typing in because it gets tedious after you just change a few things on the project. So what this pipeline does. Uh, it's broken up into subsections. So it has the main pipeline, and then it has core methods, and then it has helper methods as well. So in the core methods, we have a pre-flight check that kind of just checks for the temp directory within the tool. It checks if you have Git installed. It checks if you have Java and Docker installed. And then we move on to stage one, which is to clone the repository. It clones the repository, and it typically just clones. All it does is it clones it to the temp directory, and once it does that, it moves on into that directory where we move on to stage two, and it builds it using the NVMW script that is inside typically Spring Boot applications. So once it builds that, it moves on to stage three, which checks for certain configurations in the pipeline. For example, we will have two configuration files. One is called the minipipe.json, and the other one is known as a secrets file. That secrets file is basically used for applications that have API keys. So as you can see, it looks for the minipipe.json. It looks for that Docker file for you to actually create Docker containers. And then it looks for that secret file, as you can see here. And if it does, all it does is it just trips a Boolean. And once we move on to the build stage, you'll see where that Boolean actually comes into place. And then we move on to stage four. It locates the output file that was made from the building, and it moves it to the root directory of the actual uh, tool. And then we move on to the image construction. So what Docker typically does when you deploy is that you need to create an image of whatever application that you're using. What this does is it looks for any running containers already using that image. It stops them, and then it deletes the image. You cannot delete a image if a Docker container is using it. So that's why I have it set to look for Docker containers first and then delete it. Once it does all that, it moves on to stage six. Now, there's two variants of stage six. There's one where you would have uh, container deployment without the API key. And this all it does is it just starts it using this Docker run command along with the parameters that you specified in the configuration file. And this is stage six with an API key. And all it does is it runs basically the same command along with um, the same parameters. And all it does is it adds an environment variable called key. You could change it if you are familiar with Python. You can go inside the code and change it to whatever environmental variable you would like. And all it does at the end is just cleans up and gets ready for the next push. All of this pipeline just runs is on a small, lightweight Flask server. And we'll see this in action just a bit. We're going to be deploying one of my applications that I've been working on. It's called the Cookbook application. Um, we're going to be deploying it on AWS, and I will show you how to actually deploy it. If you're not familiar with AWS, I will try to explain as much as I can as I'm going through. So let's get in this. So inside my AWS management console, I have no running instances. Well, I had one running, which was the cookbook application, but uh, I did something and I kind of messed it up where I was running Ubuntu prior to me running Windows again. And I left my key pair inside Ubuntu and I ended up deleting the whole entire drive. So I lost the key and I wasn't able to get into my running instance again. So I'm just gonna remake it and I figured this would be a perfect time to kind of showcase how my tool works. So in order for us to go on and deploy this, there's a couple of things that we need to install. Once we get the server running, of course, we need to update it. We need to install Java, we need to install Docker, and we need to install Git. So I will go and kind of show you how to do this. So let's go into launch an instance, and we'll just call this deployment tutorial. I typically like to use Debian since I use Raspberry Pis a lot for deployment, and Debian is close to the Raspberry Pi OS. So I'm very familiar with Debian. You go ahead and pick the free one if you like. I typically don't like to use the free ones for the instance type because of how slow they could be if you start using a lot of processing power. So I typically like to go for like a medium tier to a large tier. But for this tutorial, we use the medium tier. Now the key pair login, it's what it's used for. It's for you to actually access that instance that's running in the cloud once it's created. Um, we will create a new one because we don't want people who don't have this key accessing your instance. So I'll just create mine. If I can type, we'll go ahead and save it as a PN. We'll create the key. It'll download, and this is what you'll typically use to access your instance in the cloud. Keep this key safe. Um, we'll go into more depth of what security groups are in a little bit, but you would want to create one and allow SSH traffic from your IP only. Um, since we are going to be deploying a simple Spring Boot application, please allow HTTP traffic from your instance. And we'll go over some other ports that you will need to allow in order for you to actually get this pipeline working and everything. We'll just leave this how it is and just launch the instance. Now we wait. Now that we have it created, let's go back to the running. You'll see it's not running, but see where I have terminated my old instance, but this is pending. So once it actually starts up, we will actually be able to access it. So just refresh it. Okay, now it's running and it's initializing. And once you see that it says 2 out of 2 checks passed, then you'll typically be able to now to access it via SSH. Still initializing. Still initializing. If you don't have experience with AWS, I highly suggest you learn how to use AWS. Typically, a lot of companies nowadays use cloud providers, whether it's Google Cloud, Oracle, you have AWS, which is one of my favorites. You also have DigitalOcean, what Nextcloud or something like that. But there's a lot of cloud providers out there that allow you to do this kind of stuff, which is pretty cool. Especially if you don't have prototyping platforms like a Raspberry Pi or some server where you can deploy it on and actually play around with. So let's just go ahead and give it one more check. And it's still initializing, which is okay. Well, I guess we could go through security groups then. So security groups are basically, I would say, the way I see them is more like port forwarding in a way. Since we are going to be using this cookbook application, it does use a database, so I will have to deploy a database onto the server. Typically, Postgres will use port 5432. We will have SSH. My pipeline uses port 3000, and my application is going to use port 8080. So these are the ports that we're going to have to uh, open up in order for us to actually use this application. So we could just click on the one that we made, inbound rules. We're going to edit it. We're going to add a rule and custom TCP. I'm going to type in 8080 anywhere. We're going now. You could actually change this if you want to be more secure. This is just for demonstration purposes. Um, we have port two, port 22 already open for SSH. We have port 80 for HTTP. We're going to be using port 8080 for the application. We're going to be using port 3000 for the pipeline because GitHub uses port 3000 in order for them to send webhooks to this pipeline. I'll explain what a webhook kind of is in a minute. And we will add another rule for 5432. Now, typically you wouldn't need to open up port 5432 unless you are going to be connecting it with, let's say, pgadmin, since I'm going to be using Postgres. You could keep this port closed since it's going to be within its own server that's going to be communicating. Um, and that's typically what we want. Oh, I forgot about these. And the cider blocks is just going to be that. So now that we have the security groups already in place, let's go back to our running instances. It passed the checks like I mentioned before. And let's go ahead and connect to this instance. Left click and hit connect. You're going to go to SSH client. You're going to copy this command here. And let's go into my downloads folder where this security key lives. So we're going to open up a new terminal inside the downloads location. So make sure you are in the correct folder where your key actually lives. And if we look, we could see my key is actually right here. Let me just place this command. We do SSH. Oh, this is the wrong command. Um, this, let's go back. This is the key that we need. This is the command actually. This bottom one, paste, and we just hit enter. If it asks, just put yes, and you're in your terminal. Now, when we first start up the terminal and we go in it when it's brand new, we need to update it first. And the command to do that is typically sudo apt update. And you do sudo apt update first, and then you can just push enter. Let it do its thing. Now, what we could do is the same command, but instead we do upgrade and we do a -y flag, because if you don't put that -y, it's going to ask you whether you want to update or not. The -y, what it does is it just says, go on, do your thing. Just press enter. So we have it fully updated. We can install Git, which is something we'll need. We can do the same command, sudo apt install, and we do Git. And again, we could do the -y, or you can do yes, a pipe delimiter, and then the command. It gives you the same result either way. Now that we have that, we can also install Java. I sometimes don't remember what the command is for Java, so sudo, we'll try it out, sudo apt install open jdk dash 17 dash jdk dash y. Yeah, there we go. I'm just gonna install. It's done. It's like 72%, 90%. Now it's going to actually install it into the system. If you guys want to learn how to use the command line, one of the biggest things that I could recommend you guys do is find some videos online, and it'll show you how to navigate the command line, specifically for Linux or Ubuntu or anything using Linux. Really pretty much has almost the same type of commands for navigating through. I learned typically just by watching YouTube videos and kind of playing around with these things. But if you as well, you could use cloud providers in order for you to learn kind of how you are doing it now. But I recommend it if you guys want to learn how. So now that we have Java installed, we could check what version of Java we have. Java dash version, and we have Java 17 installed. Now we're gonna have to install Docker. Now I don't have the command memorized for Docker. I have it right now saved in a note in the text file, but this is the command for it. We're going to use the C URL application to download the installer script, and then we're just going to run it using bash. And we're just going to hit enter and let it do its thing to install Docker as well. And want to make sure that it's going to download Docker Compose as well, because that's another component that we are going to need. Okay, now that we have Docker installed, we can check sudo docker -v, and we have that. I think it's compose -version. Oop, we have 2.24, which is okay. Okay, now that we have these things installed, now we can actually get into the actual front of it. So let me go back into my GitHub, and this is my GitHub page. Come to my repositories, and let's go into the mini pipe, which is what we're going to need. Go ahead and clone this tool. The command for that is git clone. Then you just paste in the URL of that repository. And as you can see, it will download the file into the actual directory we're in. And we can go into that directory using cd, which stands for change directory, mini-pipeline. And in here is where you are going to be able to add your secrets file if you have one, or if you have, let's say, um, some API key that you want to use. I'm going to see if I could actually create an application with an API key and one without, so I could kind of demonstrate how it works for both ways. But typically, you will need Flask also installed. So if you don't have Flask, there's many ways that you can kind of install it, but I like to use pip. I don't know if this actually has pip installed already. We can kind of check sudo pip install Flask, and pip is not installed. So sudo apt install pip, and just type in, yeah. That's the command for the Python package manager. And we're going to also install Flask, because that's what we're going to need in order for us to run this. Install Flask. I believe it's Python 3-Flask. That's what we're going to need. So sudo apt install Python 3 Flask. And we're just going to hit yes. So this should now give us Flask overall in the system. Now, I'm pretty sure this is the wrong way of doing it. I'm not a big Python developer or anything like that. I mainly learned Python for scripting, but this is kind of like one of the workaways that I've found in order for me to actually install Flask on it. So now that we're in here, ls stands for list. This basically what it does is it lists your items in whatever directory you are currently in. And we're just going to run the pipeline command, which is just sudo python 3 main.py. We hit enter, and you'll see that this is a development server, which is okay, since this is a Flask lightweight server. But we're going to go into the nitty gritty right now, actually how to accept webhook requests to this. So let's go into our cookbook application. Now, in here, I typically have, let's go over the mini pipe JSON. So the mini pipe JSON, what it is just the name of the output file that the script creates. I'll show you how to get that in a minute. What the image name that you want the application to have. What container name you want the application to have. I typically like to have the container and the image name similar or the same. And then you have your arguments here, such as the -p, the -d command. The -p command, what it does is it basically specifies what ports you're going to be opening inside the Docker container. Typically, this is host and container. So you map port 80 to port 8080 of the container. So any traffic coming into port 80 will be routed to 8080 on the Docker side. And this typically a network that I like to create just to kind of keep all my applications that are running um, that I create in a specific network. You don't have to have this command or this flag at the end. You could just leave it as -p -d as well, but we'll see it right now in a bit. And then we have the Docker file. This Docker file, what it does is it kind of specifies the template in which we're going to be deploying or creating the image out of. We have open JDK 22 since I am developing this for um, typically a higher version of Java. Now that I think of it, I should have probably installed OpenJDK 22 on the server. And that in itself, it's a whole pain in the butt to do. Since there's no automated way to do that, you have to kind of install those dependencies together. This what it does is it basically copies that output file into the directory of that container called app. It also copies the application properties from the Spring Boot application into the application as well. And this is just the entry point of when you actually run the container. This is the command that get executed to actually start that um, application. So we're not going to be using that one. Um, I want to use an app, or basically we'll just create an application. How about that? Let's go ahead and create a new one. We'll call it test application. Description, testing the pipeline. And let's just leave it like that. Screw it. Okay, so now that we have this, I typically like to just copy. Let's go ahead and create a new folder real quick. Let's go ahead and create a new folder. Now in here, what we want to do is again open up the terminal. Paste this command, and we're just going to clone this repository. Okay, clone. Next. Okay, we're going to go into Spring Initializer in order for us to create a simple Spring Boot application. We're going to be using Java 17, Java, Maven. I'm going to add some dependencies. We're going to be using Spring Web, Lombok, since I don't like all that boilerplate code. Um, and we're going to be using TimeLeaf. TimeLeaf is a template rendering engine which allows you to kind of display HTML files on the browser so you can kind of see the changes that we're doing live. But that's typically all we're going to need. We're just going to hit generate, let it download, open it. Now all of these files, we're going to copy them, and we're just going to paste them inside the testing application. Okay, okay, now we have that. We're going to go in here, and we are going to open it using IntelliJ. We kind of developed this little application pretty simply. And we're just gonna let it build, do its thing. So at this point, we should already have the environment where this will be running in. And so deploying it will be pretty simple but before we do this and we start coding, let's go back into AWS and GitHub, for example. So in this new repository that we created, let's go into the settings page and let's go to the webhook section. So what the webhook does is that whenever you push into a repository, GitHub, what it has the capabilities of doing is sending a post request to a server of whatever address that you want to specify. In that request that GitHub sends, there will be a header, and in that header value, it will have either push, it will have merge, it will have ping. It'll have all these different verbs that you can use in order for you to kind of change and build or whatever you want to do with that actual request. Um, in the mini pipeline, um, let me go ahead and show you what I'm talking about. So in in the mini pipeline, in the main, you will see this app. You see this action. So the Flash server, what it does is it has a endpoint called webhook, and it accepts post requests. Um, Now this pipeline is still in development. I don't have it where it kind of verifies that it is coming from GitHub. But it's still in the works. I'm kind of still building it, but I got the base functionalities of this pipeline to start working. And it says, and you can see right here, if the request headers um, on the X GitHub vent header is equal to ping, then we're just going to return a 202 back to GitHub in order for them to kind of satisfy that the pipeline is working and it's listening. If it's a push request, then we'll actually start the pipeline in a new thread and we'll push in those arguments of the repository and the URL to kind of kickstart and give the pipeline the URL for that actual GitHub repository that we just pushed into. Um, so let's go ahead and just add a webhook. Just type in my password. It's gonna ask me for all my stuff here, but okay. So typically it's going to be HTTP www dot and going back to AWS, that instance that you have running, you're going to need the public IPv4 address for this, which is typically this one right here. Copy it. We're going to paste it here. Paste it there. We're going to need www dot. We're going to do port 3000 slash webhook, right? This is going to be the destination where this payload is going to be headed to. I still have it running, as you can see, and we are going to, let's go, so, we're just going to do just a push event if in case you later on in the later versions of this pipeline, I will have it to where you can do different things depending on different push events or events that GitHub does. We're just going to do application JSON. and that should be it. Hit add webhook, and you see that it has a green check mark on it. That means the ping request will hit. You can see right here that it was a post request made to the actual pipeline itself. So now it's actively listening for those that request that's been pushed into it. So now that we have the webhook already pointing towards our EC2 instance in the cloud, let's go ahead and see if we can get this running. Okay, so we already have that. Let's go into source, let's go into main, Java, demo application. So this is typically the Spring Boot application that we're going to be running. We're just going to run it to see if it actually works and nothing's broken on it. Because my IntelliJ has a way of doing that. So it starts, and there is no, so it's running on port 8080, and it started the demo application already. Beautiful, so it's working. So now let's go ahead and create a new package. I typically like to control, controller. I typically like to have all my controllers, service layers, and all that kind of separated from each other. And we're just going to create a new Java class in here. We're going to call it example controller. Now in here, yeah, we can just add it to Git. And let's go in here, let's type in add REST controller. And we're gonna need two controllers actually. So one of them is going to be a web page controller. And this is for time leaf, as you will see right now. And we're gonna annotate this with the controller annotation. And what this does is all it does is it basically just returns a string, and that string is basically the whole HTML content of whatever web page you're trying to display. So we're going to do at get mapping. Oops. And we could do slash test. And then we're going to do public string since it's going to return a string. Testing, no parameters, and then we're just going to return some basic HTML, h1 testing. Let's do a closing header on it, h1. Okay. I don't think we'll actually need the REST controller since we're not making an API, but it serves as good practice. So let's go ahead and actually start this application, and we'll access it right now on the browser to see if it actually returns that. And then we'll go into making the actual mini pipe configuration and the Docker file for this application as well. So you can see how it works getting pushed and getting deployed, which is quite interesting. So I'm using Java 20 for this. I didn't even realize that that's going to be an issue. So always make sure that your applications are actually going to be um, that the Java that the version that you installed on the server matches whatever application that you're going to be using because you will run into problems. This is something that always happens to me, just because I overlooked this. Um, but let me see if I can actually change the module for this. We're going to be using 17 and hit apply. Okay. Now scanning all the files into the index, and let's see if I actually changed it. There we go. It's using Java 17 now. And let's just go into our web browser here. And let's go ahead and type in, well, actually, no. We need so localhost 8080. We want testing. What's that the actual test actually? No. Test. And let's see what's going on here. So it doesn't like that. So we're just going to test. And I should just explain this. So this does is it basically looks for a folder inside a file inside the templates called test. We're just going to create a new one. We're just going to call it test. We can add this file onto there. The body, all it's just going to contain is h1. Did it for me. Testing before the change. Let's go ahead and just rerun this to see if it actually worked. When you have making a tutorial for such a simple pipeline will involve so many things, but this will serve as practice for you to actually see if there's any problems that kind of arise, how you can debug them yourself. Okay, start it up. And this is the test before the change. Okay. So now that we have that running, um, I'm gonna go back into my cookbook application so I can get a copy of that mini pipe JSON. So we're going to go into the mini pipe JSON and let's just copy this real quick. Let's go into IntelliJ, and in the root directory of this application is where this file is going to be. You're going to call it mini pipe.json, and you are going to add that to the GitHub repository, paste that in there. So the way that you can get your application name from this uh, project without you even have to compile it or anything like that is typically just go into your POM XML and you will find the name or you find the artifact ID and this. So in our case, this would be demo dash and then this is the version of what you will need. So it's demo dash that. And you can give the image name whatever you want. We'll go for demo dash image demo application or demo app, we call it, and we'll do demo dash app for it. We won't need that network tag, and we could just do port 8080 to port 8080 since we already opened it up on the actual server that this is going to be running in. So that's basically it for the mini pipes. Pretty quite simple configuration. Now we're just going to move on to the actual to the Docker file. Docker files are a little bit more complicated to explain, but I'll try to do my best. Docker file. I'm going to add that. Let's go ahead and go back to my repository. And let's get a copy of whatever Docker file I've got. So I'm just going to copy this, go to here, paste. Now we are using 17, so OpenJDK 17. We're going to copy the target. Remember, this is basically the same output file name that you've already configured in the mini pipeline JSON, but with just .jar at the end. So it's going to be demo. Application property stays the same. Everything else will stay the same. The only thing you really have to change is just this target. You can leave app the same because if you change this, you will have to change this down here as well to match that. So keep that in mind. And that's pretty much it. Try to see if we can give this a crack and see if it actually deploys how I actually intended it for it to deploy. So we're going to stop this and let's go ahead and see if we can actually get status, get add dash a, get commit dash m, give it a message. This is first repo. Let's go ahead and push this up. And you can see it's going to start, and it should start executing the pipeline. As you can see, it starts going through all its checks, starts cloning the repository, and I got an error. Basically saying that there is no temp directory. Let's go ahead and fix that. Since there's no temp directory, I will make this change on my end with an update, but we're going to go ahead and create a temp directory. So we're going to do mkdir temp. And let's go ahead and run this pipeline one more time. And if you want to go ahead and resend those requests, you can go here and you can see these recent deliveries that just happened to it. The recent one that we just did was this one. So we can go ahead and just redeliver it, redeliver the payload. It'll catch it on its end here, and it will start executing the pipeline once again. There you go. It cloned it. Now it's building the project. I happen to bypass tests because normally you would want to have tests for this application. Now it's going on to stage 4. It's creating the image from that Docker file that we created. Now it's copying the demo snapshot that we just built. Now it's going to start for the deployment stage, and it just deployed it. Now, so the way that we can go and access this, let's go into our settings. Let's go ahead and just copy this address here. Let's paste it up here, but instead of 3000, we're going to do 8080. 8080, and then the endpoint, so test. This is the test before the change, okay? So let's go ahead and make a change to this project. Let's go into static, let's go into templates and change. Testing change before, let's do after. Let's change for using the mini pipeline tool. Let's go ahead and save that. Again, in our GitHub, we have to push this change to it. So git status, git add, -a, and git status, and you'll see it'll turn green. And this will be changed the repo. Or just change their file. Wow. This doesn't have to be too descriptive, but and let's go ahead and just push this once again. And let's see these changes in real time here. So go ahead and push. And let's see this in action one more time. And let's go in again. I just love watching this thing work. I don't know why. It's just something about your own creations that kind of makes you feel special. This is the whole reason why I got into coding, which is this. And it built successfully. It should have deployed it automatically as well. So remember, it might not, those changes might not go into effect because remember, it has to stop the container and has to rerun it. So however long your Spring Boot application takes to initialize, it typically takes about maybe 10 to 12 seconds for it to start, depending on how big your project is. It may be longer, but it's generally a good thing to wait for at least a little bit. But in our case, since our project is small, it should have been relatively fast. So if I were to refresh this, you will see the change. And as you can see, the pipeline actually worked and it changed some of the files that are in there. And this is basically the tool that I created. I will be creating another tutorial on how you can actually implement API keys to it, but it's pretty straightforward. Like I said, all you have to do is just create a secrets file into the actual temp directory of the pipeline. So you would go into here. Let's go to ls. Let's go to cd main. Let's go to temp. Isn't temp that had it? Give it an actual temp directory where it's actually looking for that secret file. Let me just double make sure. Let's go to core methods. So get current working directory. So changes to the removing temp files. So let's go ahead and just test it inside. So let's go ahead and sudo. Let's go to nano and let's do secrets. Secrets.json. And we can just do, let's do this key. And then let's just write some random thing. So this is going to be our secrets file. And as you can see, it's right there. Let's go ahead and start this pipeline one more time. And you can kind of see how this pipeline actually goes through. So on stage 4, when it starts, no, stage 3, when it starts looking for the required files, you will see that it says now checking for secrets, and and if it doesn't find it, it will just say no secrets found. But let's go ahead and do this, see if it actually works. Um, so let's go ahead and restart the pipeline one more time. And we don't have to push anything. We could just literally um, go back to that temporary repository that I made just to test the application. And you go into settings, webhooks, this one, recent deliveries. Let's go ahead and just redeliver this one. And we can see the pipeline in action one more time. This will happen fast. So no secrets were found. So this means that it's supposed to be in the temp directory. So let's go ahead and exit out of the pipeline again. Let's go to mv secrets.json temp. Now, since it's in the temp directory, let's go ahead and restart the pipeline one more time. Let's go ahead and redeliver this. Let's watch the pipeline in action one more time. Now, this is continuous. You can have this running in a different process inside the actual server, and I'll kind of show you how to actually run this, where you could actually exit the server and nothing will happen to it. Let's go and see. As you can see, checking for secrets, a secret was found. So when you're in the secrets file folder, it will use the secret, find the API key parameter, and push it into that actual Docker key, and we'll run it as an environment variable for that Docker container. And it's basically giving me an error because the way that I have it structured. It's supposed to be a certain way you're supposed to structure this key. Um, so let me go ahead and see what is happening here. Secret key R, so let's go ahead and exit out of that. Mono, and slash secrets JSON. Maybe key with an uppercase. Maybe because it is case sensitive, which is a bad thing. That's something that I have to work on its design. Um, Go back into the pipeline. Go back into the core methods. Let's see. I'll follow the file. Config data always without API key. Secrets data. So it has to be key with a capital, all caps. So it has to be basically like this. So key, and just like that, it will work. Let's go ahead and just redeliver this thing one more time so we can see it in action. Hopefully it doesn't error out just like it did, but As you can see, there's some error handling that I still need to implement on this pipeline. So let's just go ahead and go back here. Settings, webhooks, this one. Let's go to recent deliveries. And let's just redeliver this. Yes. Let's watch it in action one more time. And there you go. No error happened after you name it key with all caps. So that's basically how my pipeline works. Um, I hope this pipeline actually helps some people as it helps me a lot when I develop Spring Boot applications. So that's pretty much it. You guys have a great day.